In life, there are things that make us wonder why they happen to us. Some people do little but achieve much, while others try very hard but still face difficulties. The ancients used one word to explain these things: karma. But karma isn't something vague or frightening. It's the result of what we think, say, and do. In today's video, we'll explore what karma means in philosophy, why no one can avoid it, and more importantly, how to transform karma in a more positive direction. If you want to understand your life more deeply and live more proactively, subscribe to the Simple Philosophy channel to follow more meaningful content. In life, there are times when people wonder why, in the same circumstances. Each person experiences different outcomes. Some find success, while others face difficulties. Some sow good deeds and receive peace, while others do wrong and face the consequences. To explain this, the ancients used a very profound concept: karma. What does the word karma mean, and how should it be understood correctly? Karma is the sum total of your actions, words, and thoughts, which shape the results in the present and the future. Many people, when they hear about karma, often think of something distant or punitive. But in reality, karma is not a judgment, but a natural law. Every action you take, every word you speak, and even every thought you cultivate creates an influence. These influences don't disappear, they accumulate over time. When you consistently think positively, act kindly, and speak constructively, you are creating a flow of positive energy. This flow will return in many forms, whether it's opportunities, relationships, or inner peace. Conversely, when you are consistently negative, hurt others, or act irresponsibly, you are also creating a different kind of karma. And over time, it will come back, possibly in the form of troubles, conflicts, or heavy feelings within yourself. The important thing is that karma doesn't just lie in external actions. It begins with thoughts. A repeated thought will influence emotions. Emotions will influence behavior, and behavior will create results. Therefore, karma is not something that happens unexpectedly, but rather a chain of interconnected events from within to without. Another important point is that karma can change. It's not a fixed sentence. Each new choice you make can create a different path. When you realize this, you no longer feel constrained. You understand that you have responsibilities, but also the ability to change. Why did the ancients say, "You reap what you sow"? Every action creates a consequence. Sooner or later, what you do will come back to you in some form. The saying, "You reap what you sow," is not just a simple warning, but the culmination of a very practical law. If you sow a good seed and take good care of it, you will get a corresponding result. This is very clear in nature. The same applies to life. What you do today will affect tomorrow. When you work diligently, you gain experience. When you keep your word, you build trust. When you help others, you create connections. These things may not yield immediate results, but over time, they will form a solid foundation. Conversely, if you work carelessly, irresponsibly, always try to avoid responsibility, you are also producing a corresponding result. You may not see the consequences in the short term, but in the long run, you will face difficulties. You lack skills, trust, and opportunities. The important thing is that the consequences don't always come immediately. This is why many people don't realize the connection. They might do something wrong but not see the consequences immediately, so they think it's okay. But in reality, karma is accumulating. At some point, when the conditions are right, the consequences will appear. And at that time, many people will be surprised. Understanding this gives you a longer-term perspective. You're not just looking at the immediate results, but at the process. You don't choose the easy option now if it causes harm later. You choose the right option, even if it might be more difficult. An important point is that you reap what you sow, and this applies not only to your actions towards others, but also to yourself. How you treat yourself also produces results. If you neglect your health, you will pay the price physically. If you don't take care of your mental health, you will easily fall into stress. Conversely, when you care about yourself, you create a better foundation. You have energy, stability, and the ability to face challenges. Understanding karma and the law of sowing and reaping helps you live more consciously. You don't act on momentary emotions, but consider the consequences. You know that every choice has its price. You can't expect good results without being willing to do the corresponding things. This doesn't make life burdensome. On the contrary, it helps you see things more clearly. You no longer feel like everything's random. You understand that what you have is a result of what you have done. What you will have depends on what you are doing. One great value of understanding karma is that you blame less. When faced with difficulties, you don't just look outward, but look inward. You ask yourself what you've done, what choices you've made. From there, you adjust. This helps you grow. You're not trapped in the role of a victim. You become someone who takes responsibility for your own life. Ultimately, karma is not something to fear, but something to understand and utilize. When you understand, you know how to create good things. You don't need to do something grand. Just live a little better each day. Think a little more positively and act a little more kindly. Over time, these small things will accumulate into a big result. You don't need to actively seek out luck. You create the conditions for luck to appear. And when you look back, you'll see that life isn't a series of random events, but the result of what you've sown. That is the profound meaning of the word karma. It's not meant to bind you, but to remind you that every action has value, and you always have the opportunity to create a better path for yourself. In common perception, many people associate the word karma with a heavy feeling, as if it were an invisible punishment for past mistakes. However, upon deeper understanding, you'll see that karma isn't someone's punishment, but rather a natural law, operating like a seed sown in the ground and sprouting according to its inherent nature. Karma is not punishment. Karma is not intended to punish anyone, but is simply the natural law of cause and effect. In nature, when you sow a seed, you can't expect it to produce a different kind of fruit. A good seed, properly cared for, will yield good results. Bad or neglected seed will produce the same result. There is no favoritism, no punishment, only a true reflection of what has been created. Karma works in the same way. Every thought, every word, every action you take is like a seed. It may be small, its impact may not be immediately visible, but over time it will grow and produce results. When you do something wrong, the consequences don't come because someone wants you to suffer, but because the action itself creates a chain reaction. These effects come back to you in the most natural way. Understanding this helps you to view karma with less fear and more awareness. You will clearly see that everything has a cause. Nothing is completely random. It's important to understand that karma isn't just about visible actions. It's also about how you think and how you react to life. A person who constantly harbors anger, jealousy, or negativity will gradually develop a heavy inner state. This state affects how they perceive things, how they behave, and consequently leads to negative outcomes. Conversely, a person who maintains composure, goodwill, and responsibility will create more positive outcomes. This is not because they are favored, but because the way they live creates different conditions. This is a story about people who create bad karma. There are people who, because of greed, anger, or selfishness, hurt others. And then they themselves have to face the consequences of those actions. Imagine someone at work who always puts their personal interests above all else. They are willing to lie to achieve their goals. They might shift responsibility to others or exploit the trust of colleagues to advance their careers. In the initial stages, they may achieve results. They have a position, advantages, and feel like they are moving faster than others. But along with that, they are also creating a kind of karma. People around them are starting to notice how they behave. Trust is gradually eroded. No one may say it out loud, but trust is no longer what it used to be. No. When cooperation is needed, others become hesitant. When problems arise, few are willing to offer support. Gradually, this person began to find work more difficult. They didn't understand why things weren't going as smoothly as before. Actually, it's not because they're unlucky, but because what they did is coming back to haunt them. Their past actions have created an environment that is no longer supportive of them. This applies not only to work, but also to personal relationships. If a person is frequently angry, says hurtful things, or only thinks of themselves, they will gradually lose important connections. Initially, others might tolerate or overlook it. But over time, the hurt accumulates. The distance gradually widens. At some point, people around them choose to leave or keep their distance. This person may feel lonely and not understand why they find themselves in this situation. But looking back, they will see that it was their past actions that led to the current outcome. The important thing is that these consequences don't appear immediately. Therefore, many people don't realize the link between actions and results. They may continue to repeat the same behaviors until the consequences become more apparent. Another form of karma is internal consequences. When a person repeatedly acts contrary to moral values, they may begin to feel insecure. Although they may appear fine on the outside, they are not truly at peace on the inside. They're prone to anxiety, stress, and dissatisfaction. This is also a form of outcome. It's not imposed by anyone, but rather stems from internal conflict. This story is not meant to criticize, but to clarify one thing. Karma is not something distant. It happens right in our daily lives. Every choice has an impact. Every action leaves a mark. The important thing is that once you realize this, you can change. Karma is not fixed. You're not stuck in what has already happened. Every day, you have the opportunity to create new actions, new thoughts, and new ways of living. When you choose to live more honestly, you begin to rebuild trust. When you manage your emotions better, you reduce conflict. When you care about others, you create positive connections. These changes may be small, but over time they create a different path. Understanding karma helps you take more responsibility for your life. You no longer think that everything is simply due to circumstances. You clearly see your own role. This doesn't burden you, but empowers you to be more proactive. You know that you can create change. Ultimately, karma is not something to fear, but something to understand and adjust to. When you understand that every action has consequences, you will live more cautiously, not out of anxiety, but out of awareness. You know that every choice matters. You don't need to be perfect, but you can get better every day. And that very process will gradually help you create more positive results. It's not because you are avoiding karma, but because you are creating a better kind of karma for yourself. In a deeper understanding of karma, what matters is not what you did in the past, but whether you recognize and change your actions. Many people think that once mistakes are made, life will be bound by them forever, but that's not true. Karma is not fixed. It is always in motion according to what you think, say, and do each day. This is a story about people who transform their karma. Conversely, there are people who have made mistakes, but know how to change. Live better lives, and gradually, their lives change in a positive direction. There was a person who went through a very impulsive phase in their life, were quick-tempered, lacked self-control, and repeatedly hurt others with their words. At work, they were also irresponsible, often blaming others and avoiding responsibility when problems arose. Initially, they didn't realize it. They thought the circumstances weren't good, that others didn't understand them. But over time, things started to change in an undesirable way. Relationships gradually deteriorate. People around them become distant. At work, they face more difficulties, receive less trust, and have fewer opportunities. At some point, they began to reflect. Not because they were forced to, but because they clearly felt the deadlock in their own lives. They realized that the problem wasn't just external. A large part of it stemmed from how they thought and behaved. This realization is the first step. It's not easy to accept that you were wrong, but that's what opens up the possibility of change. They start with small things. When they feel angry, they don't react immediately like they used to. They practice pausing, breathing, and thinking before speaking. Initially, this wasn't easy. Old habits resurfaced. Sometimes they reacted the same way as before. But the difference was, they realized it faster and tried to adjust. In their work, they begin to take more responsibility. When mistakes occur, they don't blame others but find ways to fix them. When working with others, they try to listen more. These changes don't yield immediate results. People around you are still hesitant. Trust can't be restored overnight. But they didn't give up. They understood that they had wasted time creating the old results, so they also needed time to create new results. Gradually, things began to change. Some people started to sense the difference. They noticed that this person was no longer the same as before. At work, efforts begin to be recognized. Not with immediate great successes, but with greater stability and reliability. Relationships gradually improved. Not all of them returned, but new relationships were built on a better foundation. Most importantly, this person's inner self changes. They no longer feel burdened as before. They feel lighter, clearer, and more focused. This story illustrates one thing very clearly. Karma is not something that locks you down. It is the result of what you have created, but it can also be changed by what you are creating. Transforming karma is not about erasing the past, but about creating a new path from the present. Karma begins with thoughts. Not only actions, but also negative or positive thoughts contribute to your karma. Many people think that simply doing good deeds is enough. But in reality, every action begins with a thought. A thought that is repeated many times becomes a belief. Beliefs influence how you perceive things. And from that, you act accordingly. If you frequently think negatively, you tend to see things in a bad light. You become more prone to suspicion, overreacting, and creating conflict. For example, when someone says something casual, you might interpret it negatively. You might feel offended or disrespected. From that thought, negative emotions arise, and you react to those emotions. An insignificant word can become a conflict. Conversely, if you tend to think positively and openly, you'll see things more lightly. You don't jump to conclusions. You give others a chance. You seek to understand instead of reacting. This doesn't mean you ignore all the problems, but rather that you choose a different approach. Your mindset also influences how you perceive yourself. If you constantly think you're not good enough, you'll lack confidence. You won't dare to try. You won't dare to seize opportunities. This creates a vicious cycle. You don't take action, so there are no results. Without results, you become even more convinced that you're not capable. Conversely, when you cultivate positive and realistic thinking, you create a better foundation. You believe that you can learn and that you can improve. From there, you take action, and action produces results. Results reinforce belief. This is how karma is formed from within. An important point is that controlling your thoughts doesn't mean forcing yourself to always be positive. That's not realistic. It's essential to recognize your own thoughts. When you find yourself thinking negatively, you don't let them completely control you. You pause, reflect, and adjust. You wonder if that thought is entirely correct or just a fleeting emotion. This awareness helps you avoid being swept away. You have the space to choose how to react. Over time, as you practice this, the quality of your thinking changes. You become less extreme, less reactive, and more balanced. And when thinking changes, actions change. When actions change, results change too. That's how karma works from the root. Finally, understanding that karma begins with thoughts helps you return to yourself. You're not just trying to change outwardly, but starting from within. You pay more attention to what you think each day. You don't let negative thoughts repeat themselves without realizing it. You cultivate positive thoughts, not to be fake, but to create a better path forward. When you do that, you not only change the outcome, but you also change how you experience life. You are calmer, clear-minded, and less easily swayed by fluctuations. And that is the profound meaning of understanding and transforming karma, not to become perfect, but to become a little better each day, from within. In their journey to understand the concept of karma, many people often only look at major events, forgetting that karma is actually formed from very small, repeated things every day. It's not a single decision that shapes your life, but rather seemingly simple habits that silently accumulate over time. Karma manifests itself through daily habits. The things you do repeatedly will gradually shape who you are and influence your life. Every day, you have hundreds of small choices. You choose to wake up on time or procrastinate. You choose to work with focus or be easily distracted. You choose to speak gently or react emotionally. These choices may not make an immediate difference, but when repeated over a long period, they become habits. And habits gradually shape who you are. A disciplined person will have a completely different way of life compared to someone who lives impulsively. Disciplined people are generally more stable, more reliable, and more likely to achieve long-term results. Conversely, people who lack consistency are more prone to procrastination, giving up, and finding it difficult to maintain any goals. It's important to remember that habits affect not only external results, but also internal well-being. When you maintain good habits, you feel more confident. You believe in your abilities. Conversely, when you consistently break your commitments to yourself, you gradually lose faith in yourself. You begin to doubt your abilities, even though you are perfectly capable of doing better. Karma, therefore, is not something distant or abstract. It lies within the very actions we repeat every day. For example, someone who habitually tells lies, even small ones, will gradually create a distrustful image. Others may not notice immediately, but over time, trust diminishes. A person who habitually procrastinates will always be in a passive state. They are constantly racing against time, under pressure, and find it difficult to achieve good results. Conversely, someone who habitually prepares in advance and works according to a plan will encounter fewer stressful situations. They are more proactive and have better control over their lives. These things aren't a matter of luck or misfortune. They're the result of things happening repeatedly. An important point is that habits aren't formed in a day, but they also don't change in a day. This requires patience. Many people want to change quickly, but when they don't see immediate results, they easily give up. They revert to old habits and continue the cycle. But if you understand that every small action counts, you'll be more persistent. You don't need to do big things. Just do it right, consistently. Over time, this accumulation will make a noticeable difference. Why do some people constantly face difficulties? Sometimes it's not due to the present situation, but rather the result of past choices and actions that weren't right. In life, there are people who feel they are constantly facing difficulties. They may think they are unlucky, that circumstances are not on their side. But if we look deeper, many difficulties don't stem from a single cause in the present. They are the result of a series of previous choices. For example, someone who doesn't invest in learning and developing skills over the long term may not be able to seize opportunities when they arise. They may feel regret, but in reality, this outcome was predetermined. Another person might not pay attention to relationships. They care little and don't stay connected. When they need support, they don't have many people willing to help. This isn't because others have turned their backs on them, but because they haven't built a foundation beforehand. As the same applies internally. If a person consistently ignores their emotions, fails to relieve stress, and doesn't take care of their mental well-being, they are likely to fall into a state of prolonged fatigue. When faced with additional pressure, they feel overwhelmed. But the cause isn't just the current situation. It's also about how they've treated themselves over the long term. Understanding this isn't about self-blame, but about gaining a clearer perspective. When you see the connection between the past and the present, you can make changes for the future. You can't change what has happened, but you can change what you do starting today. It's important to remember that not all difficulties are due to bad karma. Life always has elements beyond our control, but how you react to difficulties will create new karma. If you learn, adapt, and keep moving forward, you're creating a different path. If you avoid responsibility, blame others, or repeat old habits, you continue to perpetuate the cycle. Therefore, instead of focusing solely on results, you should focus on the process. Ask yourself what you are doing each day, what habits you are building. You may not see results immediately, but you are laying the foundation. When you persevere with good habits, you gradually change the trajectory of your life. Difficulties don't disappear completely, but you have a better chance of doing things better. You are no longer passive. You are actively creating better conditions for yourself. Ultimately, understanding that karma manifests through daily habits helps you return to the simplest things. You don't need to search for complicated solutions. You just need to be more conscious in every small action. You choose correctly, repeat it, and persevere. Gradually, you change as a person. And as people change, life changes too. That's how karma works. It's not noisy, not sudden, but very clear over time. In the journey of understanding the concept of karma, there's a question many people have asked themselves. Can karma be changed? If everything is a result of what happened in the past, do people still have a chance to start over? The answer doesn't lie in denying the past, but in how you live in the present. Can karma be changed? The answer is yes. You cannot change the past, but you can change how you live your life now to create different results in the future. The past is what has already happened. The actions you've taken, the words you've spoken, the choices you've made, none of these can be undone. But the important thing is that karma doesn't stop in the past. It's a continuous flow, created day by day. Every day you live is an opportunity to create new karma. If you continue to repeat the same old thoughts and actions, you will continue to receive the same results. But if you change even just a little, you are opening up a different path. Many people find it difficult to change because they look to the past and think it's too late. But in reality, the only thing you can influence is the present. And it is the present that will determine the future. Changing your karma isn't about doing something big all at once. It starts with very small choices. You choose to tell the truth instead of lying. You choose to keep your promises instead of ignoring them. You choose to control your emotions instead of reacting impulsively. These things may not make a difference that day, but when repeated, they gradually change you as a person. As you change as a person, the way you interact with the world changes, and consequently, the results you get change. An important point is that changing karma takes time. You can't expect things to change instantly with just a few good deeds. Just as you spent time creating the old result, you also need time to create the new result. In the initial stages, you may still be dealing with the consequences of the past. This is normal. It doesn't mean you haven't changed, but rather that what was created before is still having an impact. The important thing is that you don't revert to your old ways of life. You persevere with your new path. Gradually, the old consequences will diminish. New results will begin to emerge. Changing your karma also involves changing your perspective. Instead of viewing difficulties as punishment, you can see them as opportunities for adjustment. You don't shy away from it. You face it. You learn from experience and keep moving forward. This attitude is what prevents you from getting stuck. You don't let the past dictate your entire future. Signs that you are creating good karma. You live kindly, help others, keep your promises, and do not intentionally harm others. When you begin to change, there are signs that indicate you're on the right track. These signs aren't always immediately obvious, but you can sense them over time. The first sign is that you live a kinder life. Not because you want recognition, but because you feel it's the right thing to do. You've become gentler and more considerate of others. You don't say hurtful things as easily as before. The second sign is that you are willing to help whenever you can. You don't do it for anything in return, but because you understand the value of giving. These actions create positive connections. Others sense your sincerity. The next sign is that you keep your promises. Even if they are small things, you try to fulfill them. Keeping promises not only helps you build trust with others, but it also helps you build trust with yourself. When you deliver on your promises, you feel more confident. You know you can rely on yourself. Another important sign is that you limit intentionally hurting others. This doesn't mean you never upset anyone, as that's difficult to avoid, but you are aware of your words and actions. You don't intentionally cause harm for personal gain. When conflict arises, you choose to resolve it instead of making the situation worse. Additionally, you begin to pay more attention to your thoughts. You don't let negative thoughts repeat themselves unchecked. You recognize when you are angry, anxious, or being affected by emotions. This awareness helps you regulate yourself. A more profound sign is that you feel more at peace internally. You are no longer so caught up in trivial matters. You don't react as strongly as before. You pause before acting. This will not only help you avoid mistakes, but also help you maintain inner peace. One important thing is that when you create good karma, you don't necessarily see results immediately, but you will see a change in how you experience life. You experience less stress, fewer conflicts, and more positive moments. Over time, these things accumulate into bigger results, better relationships, clearer opportunities, and a more stable life. Finally, understanding that karma can change helps you avoid being bound by the past. You don't need to be perfect, but you can be better every day. You don't need to change everything all at once. You just need to start with small things, repeat them, and persevere. Every right choice is a new step forward. Every good deed is a new seed. Over time, these seeds will create another garden, another life. So that is the profound meaning of changing one's karma. It's not about becoming a completely different person, but about becoming a better version of yourself, step by step. In the journey of understanding and transforming karma, what matters is not how much you know, but how you actually live each day. Karma is not created in grand theories, but is formed from very specific actions and everyday words that you use daily. Therefore, if you want to change the outcome of your life, you need to start with seemingly small things that have a profound impact. The first method is to control your actions. Be mindful of what you do, because every action leaves a mark. Every action you take is like a mark on life. Some marks are faint, some are bold, but all contribute to shaping who you are and what you will receive in the future. Many people tend to focus only on big actions, but in reality, it's the small, repeated actions that have the deepest impact. For example, you have a habit of being late. Each time, it's only a few minutes, seemingly insignificant. But over time, others start to see you as someone who disrespects time and lacks responsibility. Conversely, if you are always punctual and consistent in your actions, you gradually build trust. Others feel secure working with you. Another example is how you handle your work. When faced with difficulties, do you choose to confront them or avoid them? Do you see them through to the end, or just get them done? These choices create two completely different paths. One leads to progress, the other to stagnation. Controlling your actions doesn't mean you have to be perfect. No one can always be right in every situation. Important thing is that you act with awareness beforehand. You wonder if this action is appropriate, if it will have any impact, and if it aligns with your values. Just a brief pause before acting can prevent many mistakes. Another important point is that your actions affect not only others, but also yourself. When you do the right thing, you feel more secure. You have more confidence in yourself. When you consistently make mistakes, you easily fall into a state of insecurity, even if the consequences aren't immediately visible. Therefore, controlling your actions is how you build the foundation for your life. Not through grand gestures, but through daily consistency. The second method is mastering your speech. Words can either help or hurt others. Controlling your speech is a crucial way to avoid creating negative karma. If actions are what you do, then words are how you express yourself. And in many cases, words have a faster and stronger impact than actions. A well-timed comment can make someone feel understood and encouraged, but an unthoughtful comment can inflict deep hurt. The remarkable thing is that once words are spoken, they are very difficult to take back. You can apologize, but the feelings the other person experienced will remain. Many people don't intentionally hurt others, but due to a lack of control over their words, they unintentionally create distance. For example, when you're angry, you say harsh things. That moment, you just want to release your emotions, but afterward, you might regret it. The listener may not forget what you said, and that affects the relationship. Mastering speech doesn't mean you have to be completely silent. It's about knowing when to speak, what to say, and how to say it. Before speaking, you might ask yourself, is this necessary? Is it true? Will it be hurtful? These 3 simple questions help you filter out a lot of unnecessary things. An important skill is knowing when to stop. Not every moment of silence needs to be filled with words. Sometimes, silence is the better option. It helps you avoid saying unnecessary things. Another aspect of speech is honesty. Speaking truthfully is not just about not saying something wrong, but about speaking truthfully with sincerity. When you speak clearly, directly, and without concealing your intentions, others will perceive you as trustworthy. Conversely, if you consistently say things that aren't true or contradict yourself, you gradually lose trust. An important point is that your words also affect you. The way you speak reflects the way you think. Yes. If you frequently say negative things, you are also fostering negative thoughts. Conversely, when you choose to speak in a positive, constructive way, you are creating a better environment for yourself. Controlling your words is therefore not only about avoiding hurting others, but also about building your inner self. When you combine controlling your actions and mastering your words, you are creating a very noticeable change in the way you live. You no longer react habitually, but live more consciously. You don't let emotions completely control you, but have choices. Over time, these changes create a different person. A more stable, trustworthy, and less hurtful person. And as you change, the karma you create also changes. You don't need to do something too big. You just need to do the small things well, but do them consistently. Every right action is a step forward. Like every careful word is a protection. Ultimately, controlling one's actions and mastering one's words is not about achieving perfection, but about living more responsibly towards oneself and others. When you do that, you not only avoid unwanted consequences, but you also gradually create a clearer, lighter, and more meaningful life. Throughout the entire journey of understanding karma, if actions are the outward manifestation and words are the bridge connecting with others, then thoughts are the deepest root. Everything you do and say begins with what you think. Therefore, if you want to sustainably transform your karma, you cannot simply stop at changing your behavior, but need to turn inward and adjust from within. The third method is cultivating positive thinking. When thoughts change, actions will change, and consequently, karma will gradually transform. Thoughts are like a silent stream in the mind. You don't see them as clearly as actions, but they are always there and influence every decision. A negative thought, if repeated many times, will become a habit. You start to see everything pessimistically. You become more suspicious, anxious, and prone to strong reactions. For example, when faced with an unclear situation, you tend to think negatively. You might assume that others don't respect you, or that the situation will lead to bad results. From that thought, negative emotions arise. You become stressed or irritable. When emotions run high, you're more likely to say or do things that you'll later regret. Conversely, when you cultivate positive thinking, you don't rush to conclusions. You give yourself time to observe and understand better. You might wonder if there's a different perspective, if you're overreacting. Just a pause like that can change your approach. Positive thinking doesn't mean denying difficulties or forcing yourself to always be happy. It's about choosing a more constructive perspective. You look at the problem to find a solution instead of just focusing on the difficulty. You look at the learning opportunities instead of just seeing the failure. Important point is that your mindset directly influences how you treat yourself. If you're constantly blaming and doubting yourself, you'll lack motivation. You easily give up when faced with obstacles because you don't believe you can overcome them. Conversely, when you have a positive and realistic mindset, you give yourself a chance. You accept that you may not be perfect yet, but that you can improve. It is this permission that allows you to continue acting. Cultivating positive thinking is a process. Can't change instantly. Old thoughts will still resurface. Important thing is that you recognize them. When you find yourself thinking negatively, you don't let it completely take over. You ask questions, you adjust. Gradually, the frequency of positive thoughts increases. A simple way to start is to pay attention to what you consume each day. The content you read, the people you interact with, the stories you hear all influence your thinking. If you are frequently exposed to negativity, you can easily be affected without realizing it. Conversely, when you choose positive sources, you create a better environment for your mind. Another important factor is gratitude. When you focus on what you have, you reduce feelings of need. You no longer compare yourself to others so much. You find life easier. Gratitude doesn't change circumstances immediately, but it changes how you feel. And from there, you act differently. When thoughts change, actions change. When actions change, karma also changes. This isn't a quick process, but it's a sure one if you persevere. In summary, the profound meaning of the word karma is that it is not something to fear, but something to understand. When you understand karma, you will live more responsibly towards yourself. Many people, when they don't fully understand karma, often view it with anxiety. They fear that past mistakes will always haunt them. But when you understand it correctly, you'll see that karma isn't a sentence, it's a law. Just like in nature, everything has a cause and effect. There is no punishment and no favoritism. Understanding this helps you change your perspective. You no longer blame circumstances entirely, nor do you excessively blame yourself. You look at what you've done, thought, and chosen. From there, you adjust. One great value of understanding karma is that you become more conscious. You don't live aimlessly. You know that every action has meaning, every word has an impact. Every thought contributes to who you are. This helps you be more cautious, but not in a stressful way, but in a calm and composed manner. You don't need to have perfect control over everything. Just need to be a little more mindful of your choices. An important point is that understanding karma helps you become more patient. You don't expect immediate results. You know that good things take time to develop. You don't give up until you see results. You continue to do things correctly, even though there hasn't been a noticeable change yet. Furthermore, you also become more tolerant of others. When you understand that everyone is affected by what they have created, you are less judgmental. You shouldn't jump to conclusions about someone based on just one action. This doesn't mean you accept everything that's wrong, but rather that you look at things with a more balanced perspective. Ultimately, understanding karma helps you return to yourself. You don't seek external control, but focus on your inner self. You cultivate positive thinking, take the right actions, and speak responsibly. Over time, these things create a different kind of life, not because you're luckier, but because you live more consciously. That is the profound meaning of the word karma. It's not meant to scare you, but to help you understand that you always have a role to play in your own life. And when you understand that, you will live more carefully, more clearly, and gradually create a better future from the present. Life isn't a complete coincidence. It's the result of many things you've done before. When you understand the concept of karma, you'll stop blaming circumstances and begin to change yourself. Every positive thought and every right action contributes to building a better life. If you find this video valuable, please like, share, and subscribe to the Simple Philosophy channel to live more consciously and responsibly each day.